How should a wife treat her husband? And how should a husband treat his wife?
This is so useful, man. If you get good at doing this, your life will get so much better. You can't believe it. You want to think, well, what do you want in your house? How about peace, tranquility, happiness, and humor?
Plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. That's a good one. It's a funny one, though, eh? Because the first part of that sentence is a lot different than the second part. Plan and work diligently. Okay, that's sort of one conception. That's for sure, one conceptual realm. To maintain the romance in your relationship. It's like, no, those things don't go together, you know, but they do. They do. As a clinical psychologist, you know, I often encouraged my clients to date their wife or husband. Have a date. We're not getting along. It's like, well, when was the last time you did anything romantic together? It was like a year ago. It's like, really? Really? And that might be one of the reasons you're not getting along. Or maybe it's a symptom of the fact that you're not getting along. Well, do you go out with each other? Well, we don't have the time. Well, fair enough, you know. You know, life gets in the way. You know, if you both have a job and you have little kids, it's, you know, maybe you have some other responsibilities. It's very easy for the romantic part of your relationship to fall to priority 11 on a list of 1 to 10, and you never get to it, you know. And so then I would tell my clients, well, why don't you go on a date? You know, and one's sitting there and one's sitting there. They won't have anything to do with each other. And the first thing they think is, I wish we would have gone and seen a different therapist. And then the next thing they think is, okay, we'll do it. But we'll do it grudgingly, and we're not going to enjoy it. And that'll show you that you're wrong. And so then they come back, and, you know, maybe they went to a movie. And I say, well, how'd it go? And they said, well, we had a terrible time. We had a terrible time. We couldn't agree on the movie. And then we went to the movie, and we just fought afterwards. And we went to a lousy little restaurant, and it was we had a wretched time. And we're never doing that again. And then they look at me like they're victorious, you know. And I think, oh, I see, that's your theory, eh? You're never going to do that again. That's your solution to the lack of romance in your relationship. It's like, well, of course you're not very good at it. You're stuck with this person. So it's like, maybe you go on 10 dates, and like the first one is 100% wretched, and the next one is only 95% wretched, and so that's a really good trajectory. You know, because by the time you get to the 15th date, maybe you can sort of tolerate each other again. And if you did it 30 times, well, maybe you'd be halfway as good at it. And if you're going to be married for 50 years, you might as well put the effort into it. Have 30 wretched married dates so that you can get good at it, you know. You know, and then you don't think about it, because people they're sort of naive and arrogant at the same time. Well, we should be able to just go out and have a romantic time. It's like, really, you should just be able to do that. It's like, what makes you think that you're good at that? It's not an easy thing to keep that spark alive and vital across decades. You have to be awake and careful, and you have to make it a priority. And so there is that planning and diligent work, and it's worthwhile thinking. It's like, what do you want? You want a life without romance? It's like, how much pleasure is there in life? You know, there's a handful of pleasures. That's all. And they're easily foregone. And then they're gone. Better to plan and work diligently to maintain them.
So there have been psychologists who've done empirical investigations into what predicts the longevity of a relationship. And so here's one experiment that was conducted multiple times, and I believe this is very reliable data. So imagine you have the two partners in a marriage, each rate the number of encounters they have with their other partner a day. And it's kind of an arbitrary and subjective measure, but it doesn't matter. You might say, well, I talked to my wife 8 times today. We had 8 different interactions. And then you'd say, well, did you rate those for whether they're positive or negative? And then you can calculate a ratio of positive to negative. And then you can use the ratio to predict the longevity of the relationship. And the data show that if the relationship interactions fall below 5 positive to 1 negative, then the relationship deteriorates and is generally doomed. And so 5 to 1, it's a preponderance of positive interactions, but we're wired so that negative interactions hurt us more than positive interactions help us if they are of the same magnitude. So, for example, people will work harder to avoid a loss of $5 than they will to attain a gain of $5. And you might say, well, why is that? And the answer is, you can be absolutely dead, but there's only so happy you can be. And so it's better to err on the side of conservatism in the domain of negative emotion. And so, but interestingly enough, if the interactions rise so that they exceed 11 positive to 1 negative, the relationship also deteriorates. And so what that suggests is that there's it's sort of like smiles with teeth, right? You want a fair bit of positive emotion and reflection from your partner, but you don't want them to be a naive, dependent pushover who's afraid to stand up for themselves. And so you want to, because you're a nasty, horrible human being, and now and then you poke your partner just to see if there's anything there, because that's what you're like. And if you find out there isn't, you'll run roughshod over them, and you think you won't, but you will, especially if they're very good at implicitly encouraging that, which dependent people sometimes are. So you do assess for reciprocity, and the basic rule is you want approximately equal reciprocity in relationships that you want to maintain. Now, maybe, you have enough additional resource to be the giver more often than the receiver in some relationships, but I don't even think that really works that well with children. You obviously have to take care of them, but it's not like they don't deliver the goods to you if you have a good relationship with them. And you want to some degree, to enforce that reciprocity. Now, you might say, well, what happens in relationships where that's impossible? And, well, I give you a practical piece of a suggestion on that front. And this is another thing you can do in your own household. This is so useful, man. If you get good at doing this, your life will get so much better. You can't believe it. Is watch the people around you, and whenever they do anything that you would like to see repeated on a regular basis, tell them exactly what they did in detail, with, be positive about it, obviously, and just indicate that you noticed. And because I saw this when I was grading student essays, and so I taught this seminar for a long time, and I was trying to teach kids how to write. They were in their 4th year of university in the honors psych program. You'd think they'd bloody well already know how to write, but they didn't. And so I'd have them write a 4-page essay on a given topic, and then they had to rewrite that to a 6-page essay, and then they had to rewrite that to an 8-page essay. And the first essay I graded, it was only 5% of their grade, and I told them, I'm going to cut you into ribbons, but it doesn't matter because it's 5% of your grade, and so they could tolerate that. And generally, by the 3rd essay, they had written the best thing they'd ever written in their life, and they learned so fast it was unbelievable. But one of the things I noticed was that they did a little testing with the first essay. They'd hand in something. It was just like, God, formulaic, boring. They weren't in it at all, There was nothing of the person in there. There was no thought. There was just the kind of psychobabble that they'd learned, especially if they were in faculties of education. And it was dry and dull, and everything about it was wrong. And so those are hard to grade, right? It's like, what's wrong with my essay? Well, the words aren't right. The phrases, they're not so good. They're not organized well into sentences. The sentences aren't sequenced well in the paragraphs. The paragraphs don't make a coherent argument, and the entire thing is empty. But other than that, no problem. It was often easier just to rewrite those essays than to grade them. So in any case, though, one of the things I did learn was that even in an essay like that, there is usually like 1 sentence or 2 sentences buried on like page 3 that was an actual thought and reasonably clearly stated and somewhat gripping, It was like the person popped out from all the background rubbish and said, well, what about this? And if you saw that and checked it and said, hey, you hit the mark right there, the next essay would be like 2/3 that. And that was really fun to see. And then maybe by the 3rd essay, maybe it was all like that. And then they were really thrilled. It's like, wow, I wrote this, And it was sort of the culmination. Well, it was a 4th-year seminar. It was the culmination of their career as a psychology undergraduate. So that was great fun. But you can do that in your own household. If the envious part of you isn't jealous of the revelation of the goodness of the person. This isn't a manipulative technique, by the way, although it can be used that way. It's not effective unless you do it with a certain degree of wisdom. You want to think, well, what do you want in your house? How about peace, tranquility, happiness, and humor. Something like that. It's not a bad first pass approximation. And you got to get that in your head. It's like, do you want that, or do you want the delights of endless martyrdom? Because you have to make a choice, and you might think, I wouldn't pick martyrdom. It's like, really? Really? You wouldn't, eh? You'd pick peace and happiness and humor, and so everywhere you go, that's all you're ever surrounded with. It's like highly improbable. So don't be so sure you're aiming up. But if you can orient yourself in that direction, and carefully, and knowing full well what the hellish alternative is, because you need to know that, then you can watch and see, well, when is this manifesting itself in the people around me? And then you can tell them in detail, I noticed today we're having a discussion at dinner, and you made a spectacularly witty remark right at the right time, and it was provocative but not annoying, and so good work. And then the kid thinks, oh my God, he noticed. And then he's like twice as funny the next day, and maybe not in some unbearable manner. And that really works. It really works. But like I said, you have to quell the envy that would otherwise beset you, and you have to want to aim up, and then you have to not be jealous of the other person's goodness, and you have to be extremely attentive. But man, as a transformation technique, even in extraordinarily difficult relationships, which goes back to your point, there isn't anything I know of that's more effective. And people, that's another issue. I mean, if you want people to appreciate having you around, learning how to listen, that is a skill that is absolutely unbeatable. And this technique of summarizing to their satisfaction, that works like a charm. You might be a little awkward when you first try it, and might feel a little manipulative because you're not that good at it. But if you get expert at it, and you have the greatest conversations with everyone. I had people in my clinical practice who were extraordinarily impaired intellectually and suffering from all sorts of assorted pathologies in addition to that. And if I was listening to them properly, they were as fascinating as anybody I had on the, say, more able and competent end of the spectrum. And you learn so much because there is nothing that people won't tell you if you listen. It is absolutely amazing what people will tell you, and so quickly they'll reveal things they didn't even know about themselves. And they need to know those things often. They've been hidden for years. It's so rewarding. And then this use of attentive reward, that's also, it's fun in a game-like sense once you learn to play it, because you're watching. You think, I'll just wait. This person's going to do something good sooner or later. It's like, pat, good work. And people are so thrilled that little manifestation of goodness in their heart that managed to sneak out past their cynicism and boredom was recognized. It restores their faith in what's good inside them. It really does. It's unbelievably powerful. And so that can work if you're embroiled in a difficult relationship, and you can't escape easily, or maybe you can't escape on moral grounds. That listening, that helps a lot. You might have to listen a lot, but that use of judicious reward, man, that's a powerful technique.
And then with regards to your partner, here's something to think about with regards to roles. So my wife and I have had this discussion many times, and one of the discussions is, well, how are we to treat each other in public? And it isn't, her name is Tammy, the discussion isn't how should Jordan treat Tammy in public, or how should Tammy treat Jordan. That's not the discussion. This isn't personal. It's how should a wife treat her husband, and how should a husband treat his wife. It's impersonal. And it's partly, you don't put your partner down in public. Why? Well, it's not because you're hurting that person's feelings. That's not why. It's that you're denigrating the relationship that you are in voluntarily. And I've some of the most painful days I've ever spent, one in particular I spent with a group of men who had been in therapy for their marriage, and who bloody well needed it, I can tell you that. And they spent their whole day complaining about their wives. Like, it just made me sweat the whole day. I thought, I can't believe I'm here with you guys. I can't tell you why I was. It's just, it was just happenstance more than anything. And I thought, how can you be so damn dumb? It's like, it's certainly possible that you married barbarian witches. Fine. But you don't have, you're so lacking in sense that you would discuss that in public, not noticing that you picked them. So basically all you're doing is holding up a sign and waving it constantly that says, I'm an idiot, right? And so, well, back to responsibility. You have a responsibility to those whom you love and are obligated to ensure that they manifest themselves in a manner that's most beneficial to them over the long run. Now, you have the same responsibility, I would say, to yourself, but you'll have blind spots. Other people have to help you with that. But so the rule is, you know, you help your wife figure out how not to make a fool of herself in public, and she extends to you the same courtesy. And it's partly maintenance of the sacred nature of the relationship. It has nothing to do with you or her precisely. It's broader and wider than that.